I'm Gora the Explorer, and this is episode 5. And today we're going to be speaking about why cardiovascular disease is higher in the South Asian community than anywhere else. It's not all-cause mortality. Basically, it means that you're not going to die more of everything. There's only a specific pathway where you are going to die more or have a higher chance to die more of. And I'd like to avoid that because obviously that's really, really quite important to staying alive and having a nice time. So, in my research, and I did some podcasting last week around this particular topic and go into a full detail, and that's going to be out very, very soon in terms of a YouTube channel. But I want to make sure that you guys on Instagram and obviously on the podcast are listening and understanding the differences between how you can prevent cardiovascular disease and how it actually gets to cardiovascular disease. Most people just see their family members with cardiovascular disease and think, oh shit, they're going to die. And they don't really retrace the 10 steps beforehand that could be preluding and concluding to that being like the end point. A lot of people want to focus on, oh, they've got cardiovascular disease, it must be a South Asian thing, and not looking at like, oh, maybe what happens if we don't have it. So that's going to be really important. So within the cardiovascular disease, the research in 2024 came out really, really nicely about something called vascular regeneration exhaustion. Now, this can be a good solution to why this cardiovascular disease is higher and how it can be leading to more people getting cardiovascular disease in the future. So when we look at that, we want to trace it back to the beginning. So where does it come from? Why are we doing it? Because with autonomy, with myself, with my clients, with our team, we don't want to put our responsibility on genetics. We don't want to say, oh no, well, it's my genetics, I'm going to get it. Well, even if you got it, you can do something about it. So we want to take complete control. So to be able to take complete control, you have to understand the proxy of where it comes from and to. So there's a link between cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And then there's a link with type 2 diabetes and the South Asian community having a higher percentage. And that pathway there is why it's not all cause mortality. So it's not like, you know, South Asian people get run over by buses more, or like white people get run over by buses more. All cause mortality are things that everybody dies with on a percentage basis, but within the cardiovascular disease, within the cultures and communities, South Asians top it. And there's that parameter of link between type 2 diabetes, the genetics behind it, which we'll speak about, something called vascular regeneration exhaustion into cardiovascular disease, which may lead into a wonderful cocktail of cardiovascular disease. Now, let's bring it back to type 2 diabetes. Now, whether you've got it from a genetics perspective, when one parent has it or two parents have it, the rates are pretty high. 77% chance likely if both of your parents have type 2 diabetes, you will have it too. If one parent has it, it'll be 44% likely to have it. And most people are just like, and I've been on sales calls with people, and people who start our coaching are like, oh yeah, well, I knew I was going to get it because my parents got it. But yeah, there was nothing that we do about it. There's no like action plans. We just wait for it to hit us and then we medicate it. And then we wonder why downstream things happen in the future that are very negative towards the community. So whether you've got it or you don't have it, or you're waiting to get it because your parents got it, you have to look at what type 2 diabetes is and what it kind of revolves around. And effectively, it looks at something called insulin resistance. And basically, you don't manage your blood sugars very well. Now, in short, the most least technical way to talk about blood sugar management is looking at the role of a transport. Now, effectively, there's 3 things at play here. 1 is the food that you eat. 2 is the sugar that goes into the muscle. And then you've got the thing in the middle, which is the thing that transports the food, which turns into glucose, to the cell, like the muscle, like the brain. And the gap between that is what we want to look at, the transport. Now, when you have type 2 diabetes and when you are type 1 diabetic, or you might have PCOS, for example, the transport system works really well, but your destination doesn't let you in. Think about bouncers at a door. You're not getting let into the club because you're too leery or you drank too much. That's what your body does when you have high blood sugar levels, because your blood is waiting outside, it's waiting in the transport, it's waiting on the side of the road, but the club is not letting you in. And that's effectively how you get high blood sugar levels, is because it's got nowhere else to go. And you can get that a few different ways. One is that even if you're not type 2 diabetic, it's just good to know how you get really high levels of blood sugar. One is that you sleep really poorly, you eat a load of calories that have loads of carbohydrates in it, and it spikes the numbers up, number high. Number 3 is that you don't exercise, so the cells don't need a demand for it. And number four is that you have some sort of particular issue around the cells not letting you in. So you're basically a bouncer's worst nightmare. And when you look at those four areas, that's why there's a lot of people waiting in the street and the club is empty. So when we look at that, it's how do we change that so that your type 2 diabetes, your high blood sugar levels don't become an issue. Now, the issue is presented when you have a lot of transport. So you've got a lot of calories coming in and there's nowhere to put it. And there's this thing called insulin, which is your transport. It's your Mercedes Benz or your Uber from your house to the club. That's what the transport is. Now, like when there's a game at Wembley or a football game, or there's a game of at any football stadium, there's more transport on. Teams put on buses, they put on trains, they put on, all these other things. And therefore, thanks, he's just called me Jack in the channel. Thanks, bro. I've just trained. So when you get, when there's higher levels of transport, it increases the volume. But you know as well as I do, when you get higher levels of transport, so like in the middle of the night, there's loads of buses, there's lots of Ubers, there's lots of people on the street, there's a lot more mess, there's a lot more carnage, there's a lot more fighting, there's a lot more shitty stuff going on. And what happens with that is that things start to break down. The area can't cope with the demand all of the time because of all of this transport that's going on. And that's the easiest way I can kind of talk to you about how, if you're looking at the role of insulin, it's like it's a great transporter. It transports carbohydrates to the cells like the muscle, the brain. But if it's doing it all of the time, there becomes a cost to the cells that it transports it in. Think about the blood cells go like this. And then you've got lots of insulin and glucose going around these cells like that. There is a cost to that frequency of doing that all of the time. And that where the kind of problems start to come on, is that if you consistently over time have these super high levels of blood sugar and you have insulin trying to be pumped into your cell to then push it towards the muscle tissue to make you allowed to go in the club, for example, that there lies the problem. So there's something called vascular regeneration exhaustion. And this happens, is predicted, is the difference between South Asian people and Caucasians like me having issues with the type 2 diabetes leading into cardiovascular disease. Because when you have vascular regeneration exhaustion, vascular regeneration, right? So it repairs your vascular system. But if you have an exhaustion of that, no shit, Sherlock, the people who made these words don't make it hard for you to understand, is that it's exhausted from regenerating all of the time. So therefore it doesn't regenerate. And what it's proposed is that the South Asian community have something where you lead to higher rates of vascular regeneration or exhaustion. So therefore the damage you create during having type 2 diabetes, or the damage you create having high levels of blood sugar, is not regenerated, or not regenerated at the same rate than it would be if you were white or something like that. I don't know the differences of why it is South Asian, why it's not, but we know that there is that vascular regeneration exhaustion thing, which means that when you are damaging yourself by having super high levels of calories, you're not fixing your type 2 diabetes, and you are getting this vascular issues from pumping insulin around your body type, being overweight, all that type of stuff, having high cholesterol, it doesn't repair effectively. So the more load you give it, it's not just like, oh, well, I'll get it off later, or, oh, I've dropped 10 kilos now, my health is in better scenarios, or you just don't get around to that point of being able to make it better. You end up paying the cost later. And that's where I look at things and make it as easy as for you to understand, is think about a scar on your arm. If you're high type 2 diabetes and you're super high levels of insulin and you're just scratching your arm, that's what it's doing within the cells, for example. The regeneration of that as a normal healing process will, make it over time. It'll scab it up, it'll make it, better, etc., etc. But think of the vascular regeneration exhaustion is the South Asian community. They don't get that luxury of always regenerating back at the same rate, which means over time that scab becomes a big cut, and the big cut becomes a hole, and the hole becomes a problem. And that's where it leads into those things later in life. Now, what you can do, and why I want you to know in most layman terms possible, that you don't have the luxury of accepting all of these consequences without there being a payback, is you can do something about it now. We know that type 2 diabetes, where this all starts, is something that is a lifestyle disease. If you eat like a dickhead, and you don't control your exercise, and you are largely overweight, and you have lots of belly fat in the midsection, you will likely have that. But you can change that because the belly fat can go, the lifestyle factors can move in place. You can exercise where the carbohydrates and the glucose and the transport can put the high levels of blood sugar, and then you can improve your nutrition to get them in best place. So that's how it leads. Like if you've got aunties, you've got grandmas, you've got people that are got CVD, they got high cholesterol, they've got type 2 diabetes, just know that's the pathway that they're leading down to the point where they kind of contribute as the stat for being, CVD high mortality rates in South Asian community. And it's important to know that it didn't just happen by proxy. It didn't happen just because they were unfortunate or unlucky. I'm sure there are levels to that. There are people where becomes unfortunate. But if there's a cascading effect of things that happen, you better take notice so that you can make these changes so you don't become part of the statistics. And with the statistics themselves, I love them because it puts you in control, right? So if anyone is sitting on here and if they are overweight, they've got type 2 diabetes, or they've got a really high HbA1c, if you lose 10% of your body weight, literally 10 kilos if you're 100 kilos, literally 7 kilos if you're 70 kilos, you can basically reverse your type 2 diabetes because it's 10% of your body weight that you lose that determines that, which is all in your control. It's 7 kilos to change a course direction of a lot of health parameters. It's just 7 kilos. And if you're 120 kilos, it's only 12 kilos. And there's no time frame that you can get it off on. If you just get it off in a year's time, so that's 1 kilo a month, in a year's time, you will die less sooner than if you didn't, which is a really big plus. So I like the odds. So when you take that into consideration, you lose 10% of your body weight and you reverse your type 2 diabetes, and you reduce central obesity, belly fat obesity, you reduce those numbers, and you clean up your nutrition to get that effect. You don't have these issues in the vascular system, which is high cholesterol, the wear and tear from the type 2 diabetes issues, and it doesn't come down into the CVT, or doesn't come down as much, and you have a better control on things. So that was a short podcast on literally once I knew the research, once I saw the research out there, and I want to break it down for you guys so that you can see the effects. And the most important thing, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole now because it's really mystifying to me, because I was actually, if anyone in Dubai, I went to a place called Adil's Indian Shop yesterday, and it's effectively the VB and Sons of London, or it's eventually the Indian supermarket of Dubai, and CBD, CBD. I don't think I said either. It's basically the VB and Sons. Sorry, VB and Sons. Sorry, I got a lisp. And basically, you can go there and you can get all of the Indian goods from Mumbai, from Delhi, from all of the local stuff. Parle G's were there, all the different rice variations, all the atta flour, all that type of stuff, and various different like condiments that you wouldn't find in the UK, or they ship them in specifically to that place. And there's a whole section of different flours marketed to people with type 2 diabetes. There's glucose rice. There's, atta flour that has quinoa in, that has high fiber, and almond flour, for example, or soy flour. And there's all these different variations within the Indian shops. And we've just done a whole video. I've done a whole content day yesterday at the shop recording. But I want you to be super clear. There's a lot of things in the South Asian community that a lot of aunties and uncles will do to help them reduce their type 2 diabetes. For example, like changing their quinoa, changing their rice, their flour, their roti, into like a quinoa flour or something with high fiber or whole meat, and they'll think that's what's going to get them in the better position. And I want you to know that as a person who knows this knowledge, because you've just listened to my podcast and I'm a wonderful guy, otherwise I wouldn't, you wouldn't be listening to it, is if they change their flour from normal flour from a roti into whole wheat flour, they will not do jack shit for their whole total type 2 diabetes. They will just get a smaller spike for that meal. But if they're eating 4 times a day and they're eating snacks and chevro in between and they're not exercising, it would do jack shit for their ability to get rid of type 2 diabetes. It all comes down to central obesity and body fat in general. So if you don't lose 10 kilos, it doesn't matter how many times you substitute, whole meal stuff or quinoa flour, or, you eat more veggies. They're not going to solve the big problem within the community, which is we just simply have too much fat on our bodies, and it's socially acceptable to have that. And therefore that's what's causing the downstream effect. That's why I'm so massive on eating the traditional food or any food that you want whilst losing weight, because you can eat what you want and lose 10 kilos, and it's the 10 kilos that got you all of the health benefits, not the health benefits of the veggies, the broccoli, the cruciferous. Like, a lot of people want to focus on specific ingredients of foods, and they forget that it's the actual total weight that you lose that is the biggest relief overall. Like, it's literally every time someone loses 10 kilos, however they've done it, will feel infinitely better than when they had the 10 kilos on them. It's because the weight and the cost of having an extra 10, 20, 30 kilos on your body is so harsh that when you relieve that, that becomes all of the health benefits. Just imagine you standing every day or sitting every day with a weight around your midsection that's a 30 kilo weight, and you trying to do your normal day to day, how that would feel. That's why there's so many health consequences and concerns of having that additional weight. So if you see your auntie or you see daddy and you see all of these people substituting their whole flour or their normal flour for wholemeal flour, or they go and eat brown rice instead of white rice, or they go and start having oats for breakfast instead of cereal, if they've still got 10 kilos to lose and 15 kilos to lose, encourage them to lose the weight, not change the ingredients, because the weight loss will get them the result that they're hoping for. And the roundabout way of what I was trying to say is that I think I'm pretty good at making content, but those shops, those Indian shops, they are stacked full of marketing that is not true. Glucose rice. It's parboiled rice. It's rice that has a little bit more protein, a little less carbohydrate, and now it's getting marketed as glucose, right? You don't take me down the whole, the whole element of Fair and Lovely and all that type of stuff, because that's marketing to a absolute higher degree. And there is an element to all of this where shops, especially the community, they love the branding, they love the high fiber this, low fat this, great for diabetics here. I just want you to get rid of all of that and just know that if you are wanting to avoid CVD, which is cardiovascular disease, if you're wanting to get away from type 2 diabetes, the literally thing that you have to do, which is 80 to 90% of this whole thing, is drop 10% of your body weight. Don't change any nutrition, a whole flour this, a whole flour that. If you want to and you like the benefits and you want to change that 1%, sure. But I know what I prefer. I prefer white rice, white bread, white pasta. It tastes the best. And that's not because I'm colonizing, it's because it actually tastes better. But those things are very good. So you have to just think about the body weight that you want to reduce as part of everything. So anyway, I'm rambling now. So hopefully if you watch this back or watch this, you'll notice there's a pathway all the way from before you get pre-diabetes, all the way to type 2, all the way to, all the way or down until getting cardiovascular disease. And there's a thing called vascular regeneration, exhaustion in between that has a massive impact. And I just wanted you to know that, because I don't think many people talk about how it gets there and why it gets there. And it's funny that it's a white guy telling you guys about how cardiovascular disease is massive within the South Asian community. So if you like this, let me know your thoughts. If you don't like it, tell me. I'm sure I got enough hate comments as it is anyway, so I just keep bringing them on, and then listen to the podcast. And then if you want any specific topics being talked about, please do let me know. I'm all for making these as best as possible for you guys. So outside of that, have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll stay looking jacked. See ya. Bye.